In the grand halls of Kensington Palace, where ancient portraits watch over marble floors and crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows, a 7-year-old girl practices something that most children her age never need to learn. Princess Charlotte Elizabeth Diana, third in line to the British throne, stands perfectly still as a seasoned protection officer demonstrates a gesture so subtle that even trained observers might miss it. This isn't about royal etiquette or proper curtsying. This is about survival. What you're about to discover is the extraordinary true story of how a simple hand signal became the invisible thread connecting a young princess to her safety, and how one dedicated guard's innovative thinking changed the way the royal family approaches security forever. In a world where danger can emerge from the most unexpected places, sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest power. The story begins on an ordinary Tuesday morning in 2022, when Sergeant Major Sarah Mitchell first noticed something troubling during Princess Charlotte's routine school pickup. Sergeant Major Sarah Mitchell had been protecting members of the royal family for 15 years, but she had never encountered a challenge quite like Princess Charlotte. The 7-year-old was brilliant, curious, and remarkably independent for someone whose every move was carefully orchestrated by protocol officers and security teams. On that particular Tuesday in September 2022, Sarah stood in her usual position outside Thomas's Battersea School, watching the familiar routine unfold. The black Range Rover pulled up precisely at 3:15, as it did every school day. Charlotte emerged from the Victorian brick building with her characteristic bounce, her school bag swinging from her shoulder and her hair ribbon slightly askew from a day of playground adventures. She waved enthusiastically at her classmates before approaching the vehicle where her nanny, Maria Teresa Turian-Barallo, waited with a warm smile. But something was different that day. Sarah noticed it immediately with the trained eye that had kept her alive and others safe through countless assignments. As Charlotte approached the car, a photographer who had been lingering near the school gates suddenly moved closer, his camera clicking rapidly. The man wasn't part of the usual press pool that the school had arrangements with. His positioning was aggressive, invasive. Charlotte froze. For just a moment, the confident little girl who charmed dignitaries and foreign leaders looked uncertain, vulnerable. Her eyes darted between the photographer and the car, clearly uncomfortable but unsure what to do. The normal protocol was for security to handle such situations, but the photographer was technically on public property and not breaking any laws. Charlotte was trapped in that awful space between her desire to be normal and the reality of her position. Sarah watched as Charlotte's shoulders tensed. The child glanced toward where Sarah stood, a look that said everything without words. "Help me." But protocol dictated that Sarah maintain her distance unless there was a direct threat. The photographer continued clicking, calling out questions that no 7-year-old should have to answer about family matters she couldn't possibly understand the implications of. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds, Charlotte took a deep breath and walked quickly to the car. Once safely inside, Sarah saw her small face at the window, looking directly at her again. It was a look Sarah would remember for weeks afterward. It wasn't fear exactly, but something deeper. A recognition that even in her protected world, there were moments when she was on her own. That evening, Sarah couldn't shake the image from her mind. She had seen adults in similar situations handle them poorly, but Charlotte had shown remarkable composure for someone so young. Still, the incident revealed a gap in their security approach that Sarah found troubling. They were excellent at protecting Charlotte from serious threats, but what about those gray area moments when she needed help but didn't know how to ask for it? Sarah had joined the Royal Protection Squad after serving 2 tours in Afghanistan with the British Army. She had learned early in her military career that communication could be the difference between life and death, and that sometimes the most important messages were the ones that couldn't be spoken aloud. In combat zones, she and her unit had developed subtle signals that could convey complex information instantly and silently. Looking back at the school incident, she realized that Charlotte needed something similar. The next morning, Sarah requested a meeting with Prince William and Catherine. It was unusual for a protection officer to initiate such a discussion, but Sarah's reputation for innovative thinking and her flawless service record gave her the credibility to propose something unconventional. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at Kensington Palace, after Charlotte's return from school. As Sarah prepared for the meeting, she researched everything she could about child psychology and communication. She studied how children Charlotte's age process stress and remembered her own military training about nonverbal communication. The solution she had in mind was elegant in its simplicity, but she knew she would need to present it carefully. Royal protocols existed for good reasons, and any changes to security procedures required extensive consideration. Thursday arrived gray and drizzly, typical London weather that matched Sarah's nervous energy. She had protected royals during state visits, foreign travels, and high-risk public events, but somehow this meeting felt more important. She wasn't just proposing a change in protocol. She was suggesting they give a child more agency in her own protection. Prince William and Catherine met her in the small sitting room they often used for informal meetings. Catherine was still wearing her workout clothes from a morning tennis lesson, and William had clearly come straight from his pilot training sessions, his hair still bearing the impression of a helmet. Their casual appearance helped put Sarah at ease, but she could see the concern in their eyes. They had heard about the school incident from Charlotte's nanny. Sarah explained what she had observed, carefully describing Charlotte's body language and the helplessness she had seen in the child's eyes. She talked about the unique challenges Charlotte faced as someone who was both a normal 7-year-old and a high-profile royal. Most importantly, she explained her proposed solution. The idea was inspired by her military experience, but adapted for a child's world. A simple hand signal that Charlotte could use to communicate with her security detail when she felt uncomfortable, threatened, or simply needed immediate assistance. It would be subtle enough not to attract attention, but clear enough for trained officers to recognize instantly. The beauty of the system was that it would work in any situation, whether Charlotte was at a public event, at school, or simply out with friends. William leaned forward as Sarah explained the technical aspects. The signal would need to be something natural-looking that Charlotte could execute easily, even under stress. It couldn't be so obvious that potential threats might recognize it, but it had to be distinctive enough that security personnel would never miss it. Sarah had spent hours considering different options and had settled on a specific gesture that met all these criteria. Catherine asked thoughtful questions about how Charlotte might react to the responsibility and whether a 7-year-old could be trusted with such an important tool. Sarah had anticipated these concerns and explained how military units trained young soldiers to use similar systems responsibly. Children, she pointed out, were often better at learning and remembering such signals than adults because they approached them as games rather than burdens. The conversation continued for over an hour as they worked through the implications and details. William was particularly interested in how the system would integrate with existing security protocols, while Catherine focused on the psychological aspects and how they could present it to Charlotte in a way that felt empowering rather than frightening. By the end of the meeting, both parents were convinced. They agreed to let Sarah work with Charlotte to develop and practice the signal system, with the understanding that it would be reviewed regularly and adjusted as needed. Most importantly, they insisted that Charlotte understand this was a tool to help her, not a burden or responsibility that should make her feel different from other children. Sarah left the meeting feeling a mixture of excitement and responsibility. She had been given permission to implement something unprecedented in royal security. Now she needed to figure out how to teach a 7-year-old princess something that could one day save her life, while making sure she never felt the weight of that possibility. The real work was about to begin, and Sarah knew that the success of this innovative approach would depend entirely on how well she could connect with Charlotte and earn her trust. The princess was smart and perceptive, but she was also still a child who deserved to feel safe and normal. Balancing those needs would require all of Sarah's skill, patience, and creativity. As she drove home through London traffic that evening, Sarah found herself thinking about the moment at school when Charlotte had looked to her for help. Soon, Charlotte would have a way to communicate that need clearly and immediately. The thought filled Sarah with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since her military days, when she had been responsible for keeping her units safe in dangerous territory. The following Monday morning brought unseasonably warm sunshine to Kensington Palace, and Sarah Mitchell found herself more nervous than she had been before high-stakes diplomatic missions. Today was the day she would begin training Princess Charlotte in the art of silent communication, and everything depended on getting the approach exactly right. Charlotte was waiting in the garden playroom when Sarah arrived, dressed in her school uniform, but with paint-stained fingers suggesting she had been working on an art project before their meeting. Her governess had explained that Sarah wanted to teach her something special, something that would help her feel more confident when she was out in public. Charlotte's eyes sparkled with curiosity as she looked up from her coloring book. Sarah had spent the weekend carefully planning this first session. She knew that presenting the concept as a game would be crucial to Charlotte's acceptance and understanding. Children Charlotte's age learned best through play, and Sarah needed Charlotte to see this as something fun rather than something scary or serious. "Princess Charlotte," Sarah began, settling into one of the child-sized chairs at the colorful table. "Have you ever played secret agent games with your friends?" Charlotte nodded enthusiastically, immediately perking up at the mention of games. "Well, real secret agents and people like me who keep important people safe sometimes need to send messages without talking. Would you like to learn how to do that?" Charlotte's response was immediate and enthusiastic. She loved anything that made her feel grown up and important, and the idea of learning something that real agents used was irresistible. Sarah smiled, relieved that the initial approach had worked exactly as she had hoped. Sarah began by explaining that sometimes, when Charlotte was at school or public events, she might find herself in situations where she needed help but couldn't ask out loud without making a scene or drawing unwanted attention. She used simple examples that Charlotte could relate to, like what to do if someone was taking pictures that made her uncomfortable or if she felt scared during a crowded event. The signal Sarah had developed was elegantly simple. Charlotte would place her right hand flat against her chest, just below her collarbone, and then make a small circular motion with her fingers while keeping her palm in place. From a distance, it would look like she was simply smoothing her shirt or adjusting her necklace, but trained security personnel would recognize it immediately as a call for assistance. Charlotte practiced the motion several times, giggling as she tried to make it look natural. Sarah watched carefully, making small adjustments to ensure the gesture would be visible from various angles and distances. They practiced with Charlotte sitting, standing, and even walking, making sure she could execute the signal smoothly in any position. The breakthrough came when Charlotte suggested they make it even more secret by incorporating it into different activities. She demonstrated how she could make the signal while pretending to brush off her school uniform, or while adjusting her hair ribbon. Sarah was impressed by the child's natural understanding of concealment and misdirection. Over the following weeks, their training sessions became the highlight of Charlotte's schedule. Sarah introduced increasingly sophisticated elements, teaching Charlotte about situational awareness and how to recognize when she might need to use her signal. They role-played different scenarios, with Sarah sometimes acting as an overeager photographer, a pushy reporter, or simply someone who was making Charlotte feel uncomfortable. Charlotte proved to be an exceptional student. She had inherited her parents' intelligence and her great-grandmother Queen Elizabeth's remarkable composure under pressure. During one practice session, she successfully used the signal while maintaining a conversation with Sarah about her favorite books, never once breaking character or appearing anything other than completely natural. Sarah also taught Charlotte about timing and discretion. The signal was only to be used when she genuinely needed help, not as a game or to get attention. Charlotte seemed to understand intuitively that this was a serious responsibility, and she approached the training with a maturity that sometimes surprised Sarah. The most challenging aspect of the training involved teaching Charlotte to trust her instincts. At 7 years old, she was naturally inclined to be polite and accommodating, even when she felt uncomfortable. Sarah worked patiently to help Charlotte understand that it was okay to ask for help when something didn't feel right, even if she couldn't explain exactly why. They practiced in various locations around Kensington Palace, ensuring that Charlotte could use the signal effectively whether she was indoors or outside, in bright light or shadow, while standing close to people or at a distance. Sarah also coordinated with other members of the security team, making sure everyone understood the new protocol and could recognize Charlotte's signal instantly. One particularly memorable training session took place in the palace library, surrounded by centuries-old books and portraits of Charlotte's ancestors. As they practiced, Charlotte asked Sarah about her military service and whether she had ever been scared. Sarah answered honestly, explaining that feeling scared was normal and that brave people weren't those who never felt fear, but those who acted wisely when they did feel it. Charlotte listened intently, and Sarah realized that this conversation was about much more than teaching a security signal. She was helping Charlotte understand that she had the power to take care of herself, that she didn't have to be passive when faced with uncomfortable situations. This lesson would serve Charlotte far beyond any specific security scenario. The training progressed rapidly, and within a month, Charlotte had mastered not only the basic signal, but several variations for different circumstances. She could signal for immediate help, for subtle assistance, or simply to let security know she wanted to leave a situation quickly. Each variation was distinct but subtle, known only to Charlotte and her protection team. Sarah also introduced Charlotte to the concept of all-clear signals, simple gestures that would let security know she was fine and didn't need assistance. This gave Charlotte even more control over her environment and reduced the likelihood of unnecessary interventions that might disrupt normal activities. The psychological impact of the training was profound. Charlotte began carrying herself with more confidence, knowing she had a way to communicate with her protection team whenever needed. Her parents noticed the change immediately. She seemed more relaxed at public events, more willing to engage with new people, and generally happier when out in public. During a family outing to a London museum, Charlotte encountered her first real test. A group of tourists recognized her and began crowding around, asking questions and trying to take photos. Instead of freezing as she had at school, Charlotte calmly used her signal while continuing to smile politely. Within seconds, Sarah and another officer had smoothly intervened, creating space and redirecting the crowd's attention without causing any drama or hurt feelings. Charlotte handled the situation perfectly, and afterward, she beamed with pride at how well the system had worked. For Sarah, it was validation that all their training had been worthwhile. The signal had functioned exactly as intended, giving Charlotte agency in a situation that could have been overwhelming. The success of that first real-world application led to refinements in the system. Sarah worked with Charlotte to develop additional subtle variations for specific scenarios they hadn't originally considered. They created signals for different types of assistance, different levels of urgency, and even different preferences for how situations should be handled. As Charlotte became more proficient with the system, Sarah began incorporating lessons about reading body language and recognizing potentially problematic situations before they escalated. Charlotte showed a remarkable aptitude for observation, often noticing things that impressed even experienced security professionals. The training sessions evolved from simple signal practice to comprehensive situational awareness education. Charlotte learned to identify exits in any room, to position herself advantageously in crowds, and to recognize the subtle signs that might indicate someone was paying inappropriate attention to her. All of this was presented as games and puzzles, keeping the learning light and fun while building serious skills. Sarah also coordinated with Charlotte's school to ensure that the signal system could be used effectively there as well. Teachers and administrators were briefed on the general concept without being told specific details, creating an environment where Charlotte could use her signals if needed without compromising their secrecy. By Christmas 2022, Charlotte had become so proficient with her communication system that Sarah began thinking about expanding the program to include Prince George and Prince Louis as well. The success with Charlotte had demonstrated that children could handle sophisticated security responsibilities when the training was age-appropriate and engaging. The relationship between Sarah and Charlotte had also evolved beyond that of guard and protectee. Charlotte clearly trusted Sarah completely, often seeking her out for conversations about things that had nothing to do with security. Sarah found herself becoming not just Charlotte's protector, but also a mentor and confidant who helped the young princess navigate the unique challenges of her position. As winter settled over London and the holiday season approached, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since that day at school, when she had first noticed Charlotte's vulnerability. The confident, capable child who now used subtle hand signals to communicate with her security team bore little resemblance to the uncertain girl who had frozen when confronted by an aggressive photographer. The crisp January air of 2023 carried with it the promise of new challenges, and none would test Princess Charlotte's training more thoroughly than the events of January 15th. What began as a routine visit to a children's charity in South London would become the defining moment that proved the value of Sarah Mitchell's unconventional security innovation. Charlotte had been looking forward to the visit for weeks. The charity, which supported children with learning disabilities, was one of her mother Catherine's patronages, and this would be Charlotte's first official solo appearance at such an event. At 8 years old, she was being gradually introduced to royal duties, and her parents felt she was ready for this important step. The morning started perfectly. Charlotte wore a navy blue coat with matching tights and shoes, her hair neatly braided with a small bow that matched her outfit. She had spent the previous evening with her mother practicing how to speak with the children at the charity, learning about their different needs and how to make them feel comfortable. Charlotte was excited and confident as they drove through South London, chattering with Sarah about what she hoped to accomplish during the visit. The charity occupied a converted Victorian school building, complete with high ceilings, large windows, and colorful artwork covering every available wall. As Charlotte's convoy arrived, she could see dozens of children pressing their faces against the windows, waving enthusiastically. Their excitement was infectious, and Charlotte waved back with genuine enthusiasm as she prepared to enter the building. The visit began exactly as planned. Charlotte moved from room to room, speaking with children and their teachers, participating in art activities, and listening intently to stories about the charity's work. Her natural warmth and genuine interest in each child she met impressed everyone present. The official photographer captured beautiful moments of Charlotte helping younger children with craft projects and laughing at their jokes. Sarah watched from her usual position, maintaining visual contact with Charlotte while staying far enough away to allow natural interactions. The security arrangements were straightforward for this type of event, with multiple exit routes identified and local police providing perimeter security. Everything appeared routine until shortly after lunch. The trouble began when an unauthorized person entered the building through a service entrance that hadn't been properly secured. The man, later identified as Marcus Webb, was a 34-year-old with a history of mental illness and an unhealthy obsession with the royal family. He had been following news of Charlotte's visit on social media and had driven from Birmingham that morning with the intention of meeting her. Webb's entrance went initially unnoticed because he was well-dressed and appeared to belong in the building. He had somehow obtained information about the visit schedule and had positioned himself in the hallway outside the room where Charlotte was participating in a music therapy session. When Charlotte emerged with her small entourage, Webb was waiting. Sarah noticed him immediately. Something about his posture and the intensity of his gaze triggered every alarm she had developed over years of protection work. He was standing too close to Charlotte's planned route, his attention focused entirely on her in a way that went beyond normal curiosity. Most concerning, his hands were moving restlessly at his sides, and he kept taking small steps closer to where Charlotte would pass. The situation unfolded rapidly. As Charlotte approached, Webb stepped directly into her path, calling her name and extending his hand toward her. His voice was urgent, almost desperate, as he began speaking quickly about messages he claimed to have for her from her great-grandmother, who had passed away just months earlier. The mention of Queen Elizabeth clearly startled Charlotte, and Sarah saw her take an involuntary step backward. But instead of freezing as she might have done months earlier, Charlotte did exactly what she had been trained to do. While maintaining her composure and continuing to face Webb with a polite expression, she discreetly placed her right hand against her chest and made the small circular motion that Sarah recognized instantly. Sarah was moving before Charlotte had even completed the signal. Her response was swift but carefully controlled, designed to de-escalate the situation without creating panic among the children and staff present. She approached from Webb's blind spot while speaking in a calm, authoritative voice that immediately drew his attention away from Charlotte. At the same time, other members of the security team moved into position, creating a protective barrier around Charlotte while giving Webb space so he wouldn't feel cornered. The charity staff, who had been briefed on basic security procedures, quickly guided the other children away from the area without causing alarm. Webb's mental state became apparent as Sarah engaged him in conversation. He wasn't dangerous in the traditional sense, but he was clearly experiencing a psychological crisis that had led him to believe he had a special connection with Charlotte and a duty to deliver his messages. His agitation increased when he realized security was preventing him from completing his perceived mission. Throughout the tense encounter, Charlotte remained remarkably composed. She had moved to a safe position as soon as Sarah responded to her signal, but she continued to watch the situation calmly rather than fleeing in panic. Her confidence in her security team was absolute, and her behavior helped prevent the situation from escalating into chaos. The resolution took nearly 20 minutes of careful negotiation. Sarah and her colleagues worked with local police and a mental health crisis counselor who was called to the scene. Webb was eventually convinced to accept help for his psychological issues rather than being arrested, an outcome that reflected the professionalism and compassion of everyone involved. After Webb was safely removed from the building, Charlotte insisted on completing her visit. She spent an additional hour with the children, and many of them never realized that anything unusual had happened. Her resilience and determination to fulfill her commitment impressed everyone present, including seasoned charity workers who had seen many VIP visits over the years. The drive back to Kensington Palace provided an opportunity for Charlotte and Sarah to discuss what had happened. Charlotte asked thoughtful questions about Webb's condition and whether he would receive help. She also wanted to understand why some people developed such intense feelings about the royal family, showing a maturity that went far beyond her years. Most importantly, Charlotte expressed pride in how the signal system had worked. She explained to Sarah that she had felt uncertain about Webb from the moment she saw him, something in his manner that didn't seem right. The ability to communicate that concern immediately had made her feel powerful rather than helpless, exactly as Sarah had hoped. The incident generated significant discussion within royal protection circles. Charlotte's quick thinking and proper use of her training had prevented a situation that could have been much more serious if it had been handled differently. Her signal had enabled security to respond appropriately to the threat level while avoiding overreaction that might have traumatized the children present. Prince William and Catherine were briefed on the incident within hours of its occurrence. Both parents expressed pride in Charlotte's composure and good judgment, as well as gratitude to Sarah for developing a system that had proven so effective. The success of the training program led to immediate discussions about expanding it to include George and Louis. The media coverage of the charity visit focused entirely on Charlotte's successful interactions with the children and the positive impact of her presence. The security incident was never reported, protecting both Webb's privacy and the secrecy of Charlotte's communication system. To outside observers, it had been a perfectly normal royal visit with no complications whatsoever. In the days following the incident, Sarah observed subtle changes in Charlotte's demeanor. The successful real-world application of her training had given her a new level of confidence that was evident in all her interactions. She carried herself with the assurance of someone who knew she could handle unexpected situations, a quality that would serve her well throughout her life. The incident also led to refinements in the training program. Sarah and Charlotte worked together to analyze what had happened, identifying ways the signal system could be improved and developing new scenarios for practice. Charlotte proved to have excellent analytical skills, offering insights that helped Sarah enhance the program for future royal children. Perhaps most significantly, the Webb incident demonstrated that the signal system was about much more than security. It had given Charlotte agency in a world where many aspects of her life were controlled by others. The ability to communicate her needs and concerns directly to her protection team had transformed her from a passive subject requiring protection into an active participant in her own security. As winter turned to spring, Charlotte continued to use her signals regularly during public appearances, though never again in such dramatic circumstances. The system had become second nature to her, integrated seamlessly into her repertoire of royal skills alongside proper posture, polite conversation, and gracious acknowledgement of well-wishers. Sarah often reflected on how the program had exceeded her original expectations. What had begun as a simple communication tool had become a comprehensive system that enhanced Charlotte's confidence, situational awareness, and ability to navigate the unique challenges of her position. The success with Charlotte was already serving as a model for training programs being developed for other young royals around the world. By the autumn of 2023, word of Princess Charlotte's innovative security training had spread quietly through the tight-knit community of royal protection professionals worldwide. Sarah Mitchell found herself fielding discreet inquiries from security services in Denmark, Sweden, Spain, and Japan, all seeking to understand how a simple hand signal had transformed the way a young royal navigated public life. The success of Charlotte's program had indeed led to its expansion within the British royal family. Prince George, now 10 and increasingly involved in public appearances, began training with Sarah in October. His approach to the system was markedly different from his sister's. Where Charlotte had embraced the program with enthusiasm and natural aptitude, George was more analytical, wanting to understand the theoretical foundations behind each technique. George's training revealed interesting insights about how different personalities adapted to the same security concepts. He was less intuitive than Charlotte, but more systematic, creating mental checklists and protocols that ensured he never forgot any aspect of his training. His questions often pushed Sarah to think more deeply about the psychological and tactical elements of the program. Prince Louis, at 5 years old, was still considered too young for formal training, but Sarah had begun introducing basic concepts through games and storytelling. She told him adventure stories featuring clever children who used secret signals to communicate with their friends, planting seeds that would make formal training easier when the time came. The most significant development, however, was the invitation Sarah received in November to address the International Conference on Dignitary Protection in Geneva. It was unprecedented for specific royal security methods to be discussed in such a forum, but the innovation and success of Charlotte's program had generated sufficient interest that an exception was made. Sarah's presentation, delivered to an audience of protection professionals from 43 countries, was carefully crafted to share principles and approaches without compromising operational security. She discussed the psychological benefits of giving protectees agency in their own security, the importance of age-appropriate training methods, and the value of building trust between protection details and the people they served. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Protection agencies from countries with constitutional monarchies were particularly interested, recognizing similar challenges in their own contexts. Several democratic nations expressed interest in adapting the principles for protecting the children of high-profile political figures. Back in London, Charlotte's confidence and skills continued to develop in remarkable ways. During a November visit to a primary school in Manchester, she encountered a situation that perfectly demonstrated how thoroughly she had internalized her training. A photographer, frustrated by restricted access to the event, had convinced a school maintenance worker to let him into a storage room that provided a clear view of the classroom where Charlotte was reading to younger children. Charlotte noticed the unauthorized photography almost immediately. Rather than using her emergency signal, she employed one of the more subtle variations she and Sarah had developed for non-threatening but unwanted attention. Her signal indicated that she wanted the situation handled quietly without disrupting the reading session. Sarah's response was masterful. She simply stepped into the photographer's line of sight and remained there, making it impossible for him to get usable shots without creating a confrontation that would have disrupted the children's activities. The photographer eventually gave up and left, and Charlotte completed her reading session without any of the children being aware that anything unusual had happened. This incident highlighted how Charlotte had developed beyond simply using the signals to actually analyzing situations and choosing appropriate responses. She had recognized that the photographer posed no physical threat and that a dramatic intervention would have been counterproductive. Her judgment in selecting the right level of response showed sophisticated understanding of both security and social dynamics. The year 2023 also brought challenges that tested the limits of the system. During a family vacation in Scotland, Charlotte found herself in a situation where traditional signals weren't practical. She was participating in a Highland Games event when she noticed someone in the crowd who made her uncomfortable, but she was actively competing in a traditional Scottish dance and couldn't use her usual hand signals without disrupting her performance. Instead, Charlotte improvised, incorporating her signal into the dance movements themselves. It was a creative solution that demonstrated how thoroughly she had absorbed the underlying principles of the system. Sarah, watching from the sidelines, recognized the adaptation immediately and was able to identify and address the source of Charlotte's concern without interrupting the cultural celebration. These experiences led to the development of what Sarah privately called advanced curriculum for Charlotte. They worked together to create signals that could be integrated into various activities Charlotte might encounter, from formal state occasions to casual social events. Charlotte proved remarkably creative in developing these adaptations, often suggesting variations that Sarah hadn't considered. The most touching moment of the year came during Charlotte's 9th birthday celebration in May 2024. After the formal photographs and official ceremonies, Charlotte asked for a private moment with Sarah. She presented her with a handmade card that featured a drawing of the two of them practicing signals in the palace garden, accompanied by a note thanking Sarah for helping her feel brave. The card remains Sarah's most treasured possession from her years of royal service, a reminder of why the work mattered beyond protocols and procedures. She had given Charlotte tools for safety, but Charlotte had given her something equally valuable in return, the satisfaction of knowing she had made a real difference in a child's life. As Charlotte approached her 10th birthday, discussions began about gradually transitioning her to more adult-oriented security protocols. The signal system would remain in place, but it would be supplemented with additional training in situational awareness, personal security practices, and crisis management. Charlotte approached these new challenges with the same enthusiasm and competence she had shown in mastering her initial training. The program's influence extended far beyond Charlotte herself. Sarah had been promoted within the Royal Protection Squad and was now responsible for developing security training programs for all royal children. Her methods were being studied and adapted by protection services worldwide, creating a new standard for how young people in high-profile positions could be prepared for the unique challenges they faced. In academic circles, Charlotte's training had sparked discussions about child psychology, personal agency, and the balance between protection and normal development. Several universities had incorporated case studies based on the program into their curriculum for security studies and child development programs. The real measure of the program's success, however, remained Charlotte herself. By her 10th birthday, she had developed into a confident, capable young woman who handled public appearances with grace and composure that impressed seasoned royal watchers. Her natural warmth and genuine interest in the people she met made her increasingly popular with the public. while her security training ensured she could navigate even challenging situations safely. Sarah often watched Charlotte during public events, marveling how naturally she balanced royal duties with normal childhood development. The girl who had once frozen when confronted by an aggressive photographer now moved through crowds with confidence, engaging warmly with well-wishers while maintaining awareness of her surroundings and security considerations. The signal system had become so seamlessly integrated into Charlotte's behavior that she used it instinctively, often without conscious thought. During a particularly crowded public event, Sarah observed Charlotte make 3 different subtle signals in the space of 10 minutes, each perfectly appropriate to the circumstances and executed so naturally that even trained observers would have missed them. Most importantly, Charlotte had retained her natural spontaneity and joy despite her security training. She still laughed delightedly at unexpected moments, showed genuine curiosity about the people and places she encountered, and displayed the kind of authentic emotion that made her so appealing to the public. The security measures had enhanced rather than constrained her ability to connect with others. As Sarah reflected on the journey from that first awkward encounter outside Charlotte's school to the confident young princess she protected now, she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The simple observation about a child's moment of vulnerability had evolved into a comprehensive system that was changing how protection professionals around the world approached their work. The program had demonstrated that security didn't have to mean limitation, that proper training could actually increase freedom and confidence. Most importantly, it had shown that children, when given appropriate tools and training, could become active participants in their own protection rather than passive recipients of it. Looking toward the future, Sarah saw endless possibilities for expanding and refining the system. Each child was different, and each would require adaptations and innovations. But the fundamental principle had been established. Young people in high-profile positions could be empowered to take control of their own security while maintaining the joy and spontaneity that made childhood special. The hidden signal that had started as a solution to a single uncomfortable moment had become something much larger, a symbol of how creative thinking, genuine care, and mutual respect could transform challenges into opportunities. Princess Charlotte's confident smile as she waved to crowds, her hand briefly touching her chest in a gesture only her security team would recognize, represented the success of an approach that had forever changed royal protection. In the end, Sarah's greatest achievement wasn't the awards or recognition she had received for her innovative work. It was knowing that somewhere in London, a young princess slept safely each night with the confidence that she possessed the tools to handle whatever challenges her unique position might bring. The secret signal had given Charlotte more than security. It had given her the gift of fearless confidence in navigating her extraordinary life.